Welcome to Pleasure Uprising. I'm Dr. Laura Juergens, intimacy coach, somatic practitioner, and your guide to getting out of your head and into your body, your desire, and your real capacity for connection. This show is for people who are done performing and ready to actually feel it. Let's go. Welcome, everyone. Today, I want to start with a little client story. A man I worked with. He came to me because his marriage was really on the rocks. They were really struggling. They were close enough to a divorce that they had both occasionally used the word. And what was actually going on underneath the surface, once we got there was all this sort of resentment and fights going on, all this withdrawal, all this lack of connection and communication. But what was actually going on underneath all of it was that he had erections that came and went. Sometimes they were there, sometimes they softened partway through, sometimes they didn't show up at all. And I want to say clearly before we go any further, that is normal. It is really normal physiology. It happens to men at every age. It is really common for erections to come and go. But the problem is that he was so ashamed of it that he had started avoiding sex with his wife, and then he just kept avoiding it for like 10 years. Ducking, finding reasons, getting mad about random other things to avoid closeness. Lots of resentment building, going to bed at different times to avoid each other. And he never told her what was going on for him. And the thing that's really interesting is that she actually guessed. And she told him more than once that she did not care, that it did not matter to her, but he could not believe her. He was so convinced that his body had failed some masculinity test and had internalized it around his identity that he could not take in information from the one person whose opinion actually mattered in this situation besides his own. So we worked on this. It took about 4 sessions, 4. It was, in the end, not a big deal to solve. It was the avoiding it that was such a big deal that nearly cost him his marriage. And it definitely cost him years of agonizing self-recrimination and low self-esteem. None of it was about his penis. None of the actual problems were about his penis. It was about the shame and the silence and the avoidance around what was going on with his penis. So today, what we are doing, I want to tell you the truth about what's actually normal and with real numbers, because the numbers are nothing like what porn teaches you. And then I want to address each thing you might be worried about, because there's so many things that men get worried about their penises. I want to give you a fix for each thing that helps you both get more pleasure and less anxiety and works way better than avoidance. Because for a lot of men, your go-to has been avoidance, not talking to your partner, not believing her when she reassures you, not figuring out how to be her best lover no matter what's going on with your dick, just avoidance. And the avoidance doesn't serve you. So we need to actually open it up, because so many men carry all these shames, and it absolutely sucks to live with genital shame, no matter your gender. And for men, there's so much identity wrapped up in penis self-image in our culture, and it really puts so much pressure on you that gets in your way and can make you really, frankly, miserable. And, even men who have great penis self-image are often in their own way too, because they get over-focused on it rather than on mutual pleasure. And at some point in every person with a penis's life, you are going to run into a challenge with your dick. And if you are completely focused on it, and it can actually really throw your self-esteem for a loop, even if you had really positive penis self-image before. And when that happens, I don't want for any of you, for your self-esteem and your worth as a person to be tied up in what's going on with your dick. So, welcome to today's episode. Yay, let's go. And I want to just take a quick scope note and then give you the roadmap for what we're doing today. So around scope, I'm going to speak to straight and by men having sex with women, since that's most of the men in my audience. And I want to acknowledge that gay and bi men who are having sex with men have their own versions of this, but the way that men tend to think about it can be a little bit different, and I'm frankly not the best person to speak to that. Some of my queer male colleagues are, and so I want to leave that topic really to them. And I have some ideas for some people who might want to come on if we can get our time zones aligned. So I might bring them here, but there's definitely some great queer men content out there focused on you. And also for trans men and men with other genital configurations, you have distinct experiences that deserve their own coverage. And I recommend the book Gender Magic by Ray McDaniel. But today we're mostly going to speak to the majority of my particular audience in this podcast, which is men having sex with women. And it's really, there's also some like particular sticky points around that. So the roadmap for what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about where you got some of these crazy ideas and standards embedded into your head, just like how women get a lot of vulva shame, like men get tons of penis shame from the general culture, and most of it's from porn and media. So we're going to talk about what porn and media taught you. We're going to talk about the real numbers on all these kind of metrics that people with penises tend to be worried about, like size, hardness, duration, all that business. We're going to talk about why anxiety-driven hyperfixation on your penis is actually the problem and how to unwind some of that. And for each type of shame, one at a time, we're going to go over fixes that get both of you more pleasure and less anxiety. And we're going to talk about what women who like men and who like penises actually say. Actual opinions from actual women who should matter more than media and porn and culture. Okay, so where penis shame comes from and performance anxiety. We're going to think about both of these things because you can't think about male genital shame without thinking about performance anxiety, because porn is the primary sex educator for most men in modern society who live in the West. And this is a real shame because porn is not sex education, but it is standing in for sex education. And our subconscious doesn't know the difference. What it actually is, what porn actually is it is an entertainment product, a performance product. It is cast for statistical outliers, for very extreme ends of the spectrum of size in particular and body type. It is massively edited. The people are medicated, like heavily medicated with things like, your typical blue pills, right? And it is also then on top of that filmed in order to distort the scale. It is oriented towards making the dicks look huge and having everybody focus completely on the dicks. The standard it manufactures are these like enormous, permanently rigid, lasting indefinitely penises, and the entire encounter revolves around the penis because most of porn has been made for men till very recently, and a lot of even like visual porn is still mostly made for men. There is very little correction available to you as a man in this society because most boys and men don't tend to see a lot of real life variation in erect penises. You tend to see flaccid penises in the locker room, at home, your grandpa, your dad walking around or whatever. The only reference library most boys and men get for erect penises is an entertainment business curated one. That's the only visual reference you tend to see is like porn. And also on top of that, so it's just totally distorted what erect penises actually look like in general, the general population. And men who don't show a large size when they're flaccid, so which a lot of us will call growers, not showers, right? Like, so you might actually get a lot bigger when you're flaccid versus or when you're hard versus when you're flaccid, right? But a lot of men who don't show a large size when they're flaccid tend to assume that they are smaller in comparison than they actually are when erect, because there's a lot of sort of like movement towards the mean in the erection itself. And then in flaccid penises, you can have small penises that are flaccid that are the same size erect as what looks like a larger penis that's flaccid. So just be aware. And, I don't really know if anybody's actually done this study, but I have a hypothesis that men from like higher latitudes, like if your ethnic history, your family history is from higher latitudes where it's colder, it would have been really evolutionary beneficial for your ancestors not to have long, flaccid penises because they could actually get frostbite and that would be bad. So at least it's in my observed experience that a lot of like Northern European, Northern and even like Northern Asian men tend to have like smaller flaccid penises when flaccid. So anyway, the idea is that you're not seeing real variation in erect penis size. You're seeing porn. And even in media beyond porn, the size joke is one of the last like socially acceptable ways to humiliate men, right? In comedy, in ads, in casual conversation, in schoolrooms, right? Like there's a lot of penis size oriented jokes towards men. And so men can be really afraid of each other's criticism and ridicule around penis size. And women do that too. There's a lot, and we even allow sort of like small penis to stand in for an idea of a male insecurity. They're almost like linguistically equivalent. And that's pretty fucked up, right? And so we live in this culture that ties a man's worth typically to power and performance, and then makes his body a scoreboard. And this is the same machine, right? This is the same patriarchal system that sells women insecurity, also sells men insecurity, but it just, sells them for different products. It sells you insecurity as a man to buy things like supplements and pumps and extenders and quote unquote male enhancement and even porn itself, right? If there's a lot of men out there who are too anxious to be having real sexual connections with partners in real life and who are going to porn instead, in part because of all this manufactured insecurity. So an interesting difference is that women's genital shame is mostly about being judged, and men's, a lot of it is about performing. And it's the same root system. It's just different fruit, right? But unfortunately, because of patriarchy, men also tend to be most focused on what the culture at large, as defined by other men, thinks, or other men's standards and how they compare to other men, rather than focused on their own partner's desires and needs. And that's a big problem, and it's a big solution available to you too, because it's really insane to be focused on comparing yourself to, impossible porn standards rather than focusing on your own partner's actual desires and needs for the real intimacy that you could have in your real life. I promise you, on your deathbed, you're not going to be worried about what some dude in a porn thought or how big his dick was. You're going to be thinking about, gosh, I wish I spent less time feeling insecure and more time actually connecting with people who I loved. Promise. So the numbers. So let's look at what's real, because I think I'm going to talk about outliers in both directions as well, but there's just so much misinformation out there and there's so much focus on porn that you're missing the real data. So there was a systematic review in an international journal with clinician measured data from over 15,000 men, average erect length, little bit over 5 inches. A 2023 global review, over 55,000 men, average erect length, 5.48 inches. So the real average is somewhere around 5 to 5.5 inches. And remember, normal includes a much larger range than that. That's just the mean. So 3 inches is just as normal as 7 inches. I'm going to say that one more time. 3 inches is just as normal as 7 inches. And here's what's more important. This is way more important. 85% of women in a survey of 52,031 people by Dr. Janet Lever and colleagues, 85% of women were satisfied with their partner's size, but only 55% of men were satisfied with their own. 45% of men wanted to be bigger, even though most of them actually felt like they were average. They still wanted to be bigger. But women are satisfied at nearly double the rate that men are. The problem is not the anatomy. It is the story that men are telling themselves about it. And a fair number of the 15% of women who wanted things to be different actually wanted their partners to be smaller. And now there's a few products that you can use to help you. There's this bumper thing that is available that you can use. There's some other kinds of shallowing devices that can help you. But just remember, most women, and where the research shows women's preference at all for size, it actually tends towards girth rather than length because of the way women's anatomy is oriented. We have more nerve endings at the opening of the vagina than we do inside the vaginal canal. So there are a few circumstances where you might have a female partner who her main method of orgasming, and this is an exception, the vast majority of women, this is not the case. You may have a female partner who her main method of orgasm is through cervical stimulation, and your penis may not be able to reach that. But guess what? There's a lot of other things that can. There's a lot of things that can reach that, and it's not a problem. So let's just debunk the size problem. The vast majority of you are within the normal bell curve. I'm going to talk a little bit about people who aren't, but let's hit some of the other highlights for things that people tend to be most fixated and worried about in terms of their penis and their performance. So one of the ones is duration, how long you last. And I have a standalone episode coming on soon, specifically about what it really takes to last longer. There's an episode with Caitlin V that's earlier on in my show history that you can find where we touch on some of the things that help you last longer. I don't particularly think we go into enough detail for you to really understand what we're talking about. And I don't recommend some of the kind of off-the-shelf quick fix type of programs for those things, because you actually need to learn a couple specific techniques to help you and also take the pressure off yourself, because anxiety is a big part of it. And so I'm going to give this topic its due very soon. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. But there are some very good, very accessible ways to learn to last longer. And they actually center on different issues than you think. You do not need to be thinking of other things. In fact, your female partners do not want you to be counting baseball cards in your head or thinking of your grandpa's Adam's apple or whatever it is while you are having sex. They do not want you to be checked out. And it's not that fun for you to do that either. It also doesn't tend to work. So please don't bark up that tree. That's not helping. We are going to talk about what actually does work. But at the end of the day, the problem is not that you need to last an hour or even a half hour. The problem is stopping sex when you orgasm. If you stop paying any attention to your partner once you come, that is a bigger problem. Ignoring your partner's needs after you ejaculate. And it's kind of I want you to imagine you and your partner go to a fancy restaurant. It's a lovely meal. It's a really nice experience. Everybody's having a good time. Food comes. You wolf down the food and then get up and walk out while she's still eating. Nobody does that. I mean, unless you're a total asshole, you don't do that. That's what happens during sex when you come early and she is just left hanging. And the sad thing is, so many women are socialized to prioritize their partner's emotional needs over theirs that they're afraid to tell you this is not working for them. And girls are socialized to people please so much that they'll just be disappointed and then not say anything. And then over time, the resentment builds and the distance builds. And now all of a sudden they don't ever want to have sex. Well, surprise. Why would they? Just like they're never going to want to go eat at that restaurant with you again. If you just like walked out in the middle, right? The problem is that it's as if the penis is the only thing that matters, right? As if the person with the penis is the only thing that matters. The problem is ignoring your partner's needs after you ejaculate. And so what you actually need to do is to replace the stopping with some other activities. Hands, mouth, a vibrator, a dildo, no problem. As a continuation of sex, not as a consolation prize, not as an apology, as a continuation of sex. And incidentally, this will take so much pressure off of you and it'll be so much less anxious. And you will be so much less fixated on, did I disappoint her and all that kind of jazz, and having, like a little meltdown, which also doesn't make her feel good, by the way. So that's the solution. It's a pretty easy solution. Get thee to the toy store with your partner. Find some things that she's going to like and just use those. No problem. It's great. And I think men resist this because a lot of men treat toys as if they're like a threat or like evidence that you've somehow failed. They're just tools. A carpenter with one tool isn't more masculine. He's just less useful. Okay? Guy comes to your house to fix your deck and all he's got is a hammer. He's not the most useful handy person. He needs to go back to the store, get some more tools, make sure he's got a saw, make sure he's got a drill, right? Like, you want to be the carpenter with lots of tools. So get comfortable with toys, get comfortable using your hands and your mouth after you've come. Understand that the encounter isn't over until you are both happy. And this single change fixes more of the lasting longer anxiety than any technique because it removes the whole reason that you were hyperfixated on duration in the first place. So please, if you take nothing else from this episode, do not decide that sex is done just because you had an orgasm. Okay. The other thing that's really important about this is that what actually produces her orgasm is not your dick. Most of the time, if you've been anxious about size, hardness, endurance of this organ that by itself, it's not the primary route to orgasm for about 80% of women. 75 to 80% of women will not come with just a penis. So the anxiety is actually aimed at the wrong thing. The vast majority of women need clitoral stimulation, not penetration, in order to orgasm. And look, statistically, lesbians are having the most orgasms of all women, and there is not a dick in sight. Do you know what is happening? They are staying there. They're staying with it. They are in it for the long haul. They're enjoying the 5-course meal. They're not trying to like shove a happy meal in one person's face and then take off, right? They're actually present. They tend to have much longer sexual encounters, which is very fun for all involved. And they tend to use a lot of toys, mouths, dildos, vibrators, fingers, all of it. Great. You too have that power. You too have those options. So it's actually focusing on what works for your partner and what will help her have orgasms instead of just focusing on your dick. And now, yes, some women love penetration, love a penis. Awesome. You can work that into the mix too. But if it's done playing for a while or needs a break, you want to have a toolkit of other options. Even women who love penetration are usually totally fine if you need to switch to something else for a little while, or you switch to something else that gives penetration for a little while. No problem. The problem is the avoidance, and the problem is the hiding or the shame that like makes it like it's not okay. And it's not okay for her to get her needs met. That's the problem. What the science predicts makes better and more orgasms for women over and over and over again. All the studies. Time building arousal, having a partner who knows and cares what she likes, and emotional intimacy. Those are all things you can do something about without any of it having to do with your anatomy. So while we're going to talk more about lasting longer in this future episode to enhance both of your fun if you choose, please do not see that as the only option for pleasuring your partner. It's really a distant fifth, at best on the priority list. The top 4, taking your time, emotional intimacy, openness to her desires, and a willingness to learn the types of oral, fingers, toys that work for her. Those are your top 4 priorities. I cannot emphasize them enough. Like, listen to that on repeat. Just like go back, listen to it over again, take notes. Yeah, all that stuff. You will be a wonderful lover before long, and you won't have to worry so much about what's going on with your penis. And you can just let it be part of the fun instead of sort of like the only thing that matters. And that's the real problem. The real problem under a lot of this is hyperfixation. So men have been sold this idea that your penis is this like referendum on your worth as a man. It is not true. But men, it creates anxiety. And then what happens is you hyperfixate on your penis and you lose track of your partner. And from her side, what it looks like and feels like is that you're technically present, but you're mentally somewhere else, monitoring and evaluating your performance. And your partner feels that. It reads to us as absence, and absence really tends to kill your partner's interest. So there's 2 kind of main ways that this anxiety also shows up in how your penis responds to a sexual encounter. So when you're hyperfixated, when you have a lot of anxiety about performance, it can affect your erections and it can affect your orgasms, as well as your partner's experience and yours. Your like internal experience of intimacy is very likely to not be very good because you're not even really present, right? You're so worried about your performance, you're not actually able to take in the real intimacy of the encounter. So there's all kinds of ways that anxiety gets in your way. It also gets in the way for erections, like I mentioned. So anxiety triggers sympathetic nervous system activation, which restricts your blood flow. So that just in itself physiologically makes your erections less reliable. And then that itself increases anxiety. So now you have this like negative feedback loop. Erections actually require you to be somewhat relaxed, and you can't will one into existence by just worrying at it. That actually will make it worse. So anxiety is a big target for us when we're working on anything to do with erections. The other thing that happens is it can affect your orgasm in both directions. So anxiety can push you towards ejaculating faster than you want, and it can also block orgasm entirely by keeping you locked in your head and out of sensation. The symptoms look opposite, but the root cause is still the same. And this is a lot of what's going on with the rise in younger generations going to ED pills. It's because of an underlying anxiety. And if you don't treat the anxiety, you're going to be on these pills for the rest of your life. They may actually stop working too, because you're not actually treating the underlying issue. And if you don't want to be on pills forever, also treating the performance anxiety in particular is really important. So the fix is never try harder at the thing you're worried about. It is actually redirecting attention to be grounded in your body and present with yourself and your partner. It's redirecting towards presence, which lowers the anxiety and improves the sex at the same time. We teach this in my practice, but however you want to learn it, know that presence is the pot of gold. Presence is your riches in sexuality. Okay, so here we're going to just go through a few of the shames, the very specific ones, and like how to fix them, how to start addressing them. So, right, we talked about size. The truth is you're almost certainly in the average range. Most women are satisfied with their partner's size. And the outer portion, the outer third of the vagina, and I mean like the actual vaginal canal, not the vulva, the vulva holds way more nerve endings than the vagina. And your clitoris is like, that's where the primary nerve endings are, and also the labia. But in the vagina, the outer third of it holds the majority of nerve endings. So depth is not where most of her sensation lives, unless she's a cervical orgasmer, and even the G-spot is within the first few inches. So like you are almost certainly able to do that depending on angle and all of those position, those kinds of things. The cervix can also sometimes be reached by position or just by using different toys. So the fix if you do have any size concerns or abilities, like if she has particular cervical orgasm needs, learning to use your hands, mouth, your toys, and when playing with the penis, using angle and pressure instead of worrying about depth. Positions that change the angle of contact and allow for using hands and mouth are far more impactful than the length of your penis. Okay, number 2, if you actually have a micropenis, I want to be upfront about this. Some men do. They have a particularly tiny penis. It is real. It is not super common, but it is real. And if you are one of them, being told, hey, you're all average doesn't help you, and you know it. And I don't want to drop you here. It may be true if you do have a particularly small penis that your partner can't feel much during penetration. That's a real thing. That is not a failure of either of you. And it doesn't mean you can't have great sex and be a great lover. I have definitely known people who are fantastic lovers with very small penises. But it does mean that vaginal penetration is not going to be your main event. But given that that's not the main event for 80% of women, you are not having a problem. This is not a problem. The fix is the same as everyone else's, but it's just non-negotiable in your case. You gotta start orienting elsewhere, and you gotta organize sex around other things. Your hands, your mouth, toys. Men who do this are excellent lovers. But if you hyperfixate and you decide that that's like a referendum on your worth as a human being, which it is not, then you can tend to get oversensitive and defensive, even aggressive, or just like shame spiral. And that does not allow you to be a great lover, because it's like you've sucked all the air out of the room into the self-worth issues, right? So you got to work on that stuff for yourself so that you feel like you're a worthy person, regardless of your penis size, and that you're able to get really good with all these other things that women really like, and they like a lot. So the real risk for that group of people is avoidance, not anatomy. And actually, I want to say, I know some women who are thrilled when a new partner has a really tiny penis. And my dear friend even said to me, this is literally a quote, "I love it when I find a new partner who has a tiny dick because it's going right in my ass." Because she loves having a small penis for anal. And she is not the only one. So find somebody like her, or somebody who loves hands and mouth and toys. There are a lot of women who are going to be 100% okay with it if you're a good person and you're willing to prioritize her pleasure and not get sucked into a shame spiral. Okay, number 3, erections that come and go. So as we started with this whole episode, erections fluctuate. They soften, they return during a long encounter. That's normal physiology, not failure. And it's the shame and the silence, right, that can do damage to your relationship and your sex life, not the erections. Now, look, I'm going to be honest that some women, through not knowing any better, are using hardness as an indicator of their own attractiveness. And some women honestly just don't know that that is not true because they have been sold the same messages that you have. And they've been shown the same porn and like lacked the same sex education that you have. So you may need to tell them that it is not a referendum on their attractiveness, that it is just normal physiology for you, and that's totally okay. In fact, it's normal for a lot of men. Most women, however, are 100% okay, 100%, 110% okay, switching activities for a while. And in fact, a lot of us actually enjoy playing with a softie or just receiving for a while from you. You know, that is okay. No problem. Most women are 100% okay with that. And the ones who aren't, it's typically just an education error. They just don't know any better. They have this weird idea that if they were more attractive, you would be harder. And that's not usually the case. So the fix is to stop treating softness as an emergency, have other things you know how to do so that the encounter doesn't collapse when the erection changes, and say something to your partner instead of avoiding them, please. So one, believe when she says it's okay, and two, have something to offer. So it can sound really simple. This is really simple. This is like what I might say. I might say, hey, babe, sometimes my erections come and go, and that has nothing to do with how hot I find you. It just happens to men's bodies. So can we both be okay and roll with that? And can we just do other stuff for a while? Like maybe how would it feel if I went down on you, or you just like fondle me for a bit, right? Like offer some options, but just, hey, this is what happens. No big deal, but let's talk about it. That's your gold approach. Okay. Next one is not coming at all or taking a very long time. So I want to say delayed ejaculation and like taking a really long time for men gets very little airtime, even though it's really common. So I'm going to keep this really brief, but I just want to name it. There's a few main causes. One is heavy solo porn history with like a death grip in your masturbation habit. Two is medications like SSRIs, other medications. And three is anxiety. So one thing that you can try is to change your solo pattern first. So lighten up your grip. It's going to take you a while to like retrain your penis to actually respond to that. Less screen time, slower pace, varying the sensation more, and really practicing, allowing yourself to take time. And if that doesn't help, there's also some breathing techniques that can increase blood flow that work really well. I teach in my practice. It's also worth checking your medication list with your prescriber before, going any further with other types of solutions. If you have changes in your penis, that can also be kind of hard for some people, especially with aging. And you can have a longer time to orgasm with aging. You can have less reliable erections. All of the fixes are the same for that just happening normally, because this is normal. Aging is normal. And so it's really about adapting and not relying on your erection to do all the work, not relying on you're necessarily going to come at the same rate, like allowing yourself to take more time. Usually women are 100% okay with that. And, chances are male partners are going to be too, especially if they're aging along with you. Another one that I want to say that's really important, and this is the last big category I want to talk about today for men, is there's a lot of shame for men who don't always want sex. And the idea that men constantly want sex is false. It's not just like exaggerated, it's actually just wrong. Men don't constantly want sex. Most men don't constantly want sex. I work with a lot of men whose desire is lower than their female partners. There's nothing wrong with them. It's totally navigable. But the problem is that a lot of times men who have lower desire often think they're like uniquely broken or something, because we've got this cultural narrative that says a man who doesn't constantly want sex must be defective or not love his partner. And neither is true. So it's really important to talk about it with your partner, treat it as a dynamic to navigate together rather than any sort of verdict on your manliness. And that's totally okay. You don't have to constantly be wanting sex. I just want to tell you that you're normal. So the fix is also just normalizing that and not avoiding it or making excuses or feeling bad about yourself, because that's not going to help either. Okay. So this is some things I just want to leave you with about what women in my practice and women at large actually say to me. Because first off, the opinion that matters most is yourself. It's actually not your partner's even. That's like the opinion matters second most. But the opinion that matters most is yours. And that affects your confidence and your ability to be present. And that actually matters most to your partners. And it affects how you feel about yourself, right? That's what matters most to you and your quality of life and to a loving partner, right? Your opinion of you. So secondarily, the opinion and preferences of your partner or partners should matter more than porn, comedians, like, that stupid kid from 7th grade who said some shit about your first pube or whatever. I don't know. But who cares about those people? Let's not let them run your opinion about your life, and not let them into your sex life now, right? But unfortunately, a lot of times men haven't really updated their own self-image and stopped comparing to other men and started actually listening to their partners. And so I want to encourage you to do that. What women consistently report caring about is presence, attention, responsiveness, enthusiasm, willingness to focus on her pleasure, openness to feedback, and not being made to feel like a prop in someone else's performance. Now, the honest caveat here is that some women are cruel about your genitals or your performance, and some men have actually genuinely been wounded by partners' comments. But that is an individual person being hurtful. That isn't a verdict on your body or representative of the vast majority of potential partners out there for you. So the standard you've been measuring yourself against was built to sell you things. And it's really important to remember that. Like to sell you porn, to sell you supplements, to sell you pumps and procedures and subscriptions. And the insecurity that's manufactured is what sells the product. But I want to offer that maybe the real product you want isn't what they're selling. You actually might genuinely want connected, fun sex with a real person. So don't focus on those distractions that they're trying to sell you. Instead, get sold on what works for real women. You're focusing on your own presence, approving of yourself, learning to really please your partner. All right. So just in closing, your penis was never the problem, right? Oftentimes avoidance, not understanding the real dynamics, not understanding what really pleases partners is. Please don't spend the next 10 years avoiding like that former client of mine did. Get the support as soon as you know that you need it, because you really do deserve it. And I want to invite you to pick one thing from this episode and consider diving into it this week and really giving it a shot. And for most of you, it's like not stopping when you finish. I want to invite you to consider that is a real common, almost every couple that comes to me, that is one of the problems that we have to fix right away. So get on the front of that. You're going to both have more fun. All right, my dears, I'll see you here next time. Hey, before you go, if you enjoyed this show, I want to invite you to check out one of my favorite things that I've ever created. It's a free guide called Get Out of Your Head, a starter guide to releasing the pressure, shame, and shoulds around intimacy. It has 4 reflection exercises that go deeper than anything you'll find in a typical freebie, and most people feel a shift just after part 1. So go grab it at laurajurgens.com/guide. The link is in the show notes. And if you're ready to find out what your specific path looks like, I'd love to talk to you. Booking info is also in the show notes, and I will see you here next week.